6th of November 2005, and it's the final round of the 2005 Moto GP World Championship, held once again at Valencia. The championship had already been wrapped up at this point, with Valentino Rossi winning his 7th world title 4 races prior at Sepang. However, going into this race, there was one rider who was missing from the grid and had been missing for a number of races prior thanks to an injury. That same rider would end up going back to the series he made his name in, and he would end up having an incredible season, with him arguably being the best rider that season across all disciplines of motorcycle racing. That rider being Australian Troy Bayliss. Troy grew up for most of his life in the town of Rowoldo, northwest of New South Wales in Australia. Troy didn't grow up with a motorsport background, as his father Warren worked as a baker, whilst his mother Lorraine worked part-time as a school bus driver. However, from an early age, Troy had an interest in bikes, with him being a very skilled motocross rider by the age of 10. However, after he and his family moved to Turrey, and as he entered his teenage years, his passion for motorcycle racing, and even motorcycles as a whole, started to disappear, and he would instead do an apprenticeship as a spray painter. However, it was while he was a spray painter that his love for motorcycles started to come back. Whilst he was commuting to work every day on his bicycle, he would often ride past a motorcycle dealership which happened to have on display a Kawasaki ZX-R 750. After riding past it numerous times, Troy was eventually tempted and would obtain a loan to purchase the Kawasaki. He would end up going racing on that bike, and he would end up being competitive, with him winning the first race he entered on that bike. His pace in the races he took part in led to him competing in the Australian Supersport Championship in 1995, despite the fact that he didn't have the best of finances. His first year in the series was successful, as he would finish runner-up in the standings, which as a result led to him being promoted to the Australian Superbike Championship after just 1 year. Between 1996 and 1997, Troy would finish in the top 3 in both of them, finishing 3rd in 96 and then finishing runner-up in 97. However, his most notable moment throughout 1997 came in October that year, where he was entered as a wildcard at Phillip Island in the 250cc class in Moto GP, riding for the Dutch Eri Molenaar Suzuki team. And despite his lack of experience on MotoGP machinery, Troy impressed everyone as he finished a very impressive 6th, with him just missing out on a podium after being out-dragged by 3 other riders on the pit straight due to a lack of straight line speed. His impressive performance on the underpowered Suzuki garnered him a lot of attention, so much so that he was offered a ride in the British Superbike Championship in 1998 with Ducati, to which he accepted. His first year in BSB wasn't a success, as thanks to numerous amounts of crashes and mechanical gremlins, Troy would finish the year in 8th, 27 points behind James Hayden and way off eventual champion Niall Mackenzie. However, there were some high moments for Troy that season where he was able to demonstrate his raw speed, as in the 6th meeting at Alton Park, he withstood immense pressure from eventual champion Niall Mackenzie to take his first ever BSB win, with him grabbing another win later on in the season at Silverstone. Then in 1999, Troy would take a huge step up that season, as he would take 7 wins en route to his first ever title, beating both Chris Walker and John Reynolds to the championship. The following year, he would move to the US Superbike Championship. However, he would only take part in a few races, as he would be called up by Ducati to compete in the World Superbike Championship as a result of Carl Fogarty being forced to retire from racing due to an arm injury that he sustained at the 2nd meeting at Phillip Island. Despite joining the series late and also missing the Donington meeting after a frustrating first weekend at Sugoland, Troy had an amazing season and finished the year 6th in the standings, with him grabbing 2 wins at Hockenheim and Brands Hatch. Then in 2001, Troy would build on his amazing debut from 2000 and end up in a title fight with American Colin Edwards, who would end up being his rival during his first stint in WSBK. And after achieving 6 wins throughout the year and having a strong start to the year as well, he would go on to win his first World Superbike title, beating Colin Edwards to the title by 36 points. He would once again fight for the title in 2002 with Colin Edwards. However, despite winning the first 6 races of the season and having a very strong first half of the season, he would just lose out on the title to Colin Edwards after the American had an amazing second half of the season that saw him win the last 9 races. This would end up being Troy's last season in WSBK, as for 2003 he would move to the Premier class of Moto GP, once again riding with Ducati. His first year in the pinnacle of motorcycle racing would end up being a good season, as he would finish the year in a respectable 6th in the standings, picking up 3 podiums along the way. However, the following season would end up being a disaster, as a long list of retirements combined with a lack of pace from the Ducati saw Troy finish the year in a disappointing 14th, with him only picking up 1 podium at the finale in Valencia. Despite this though, he was dropped by Ducati at the end of the season to make way for Carlos Checa, and he would end up at Pons for 2005, who were running Hondas. And despite being on a competitive bike that at times would compete for the win, Troy struggled to adapt to the Honda and was off the pace compared to his teammate that season, Alex Barros. And his season would be curtailed even further, as he would end up missing the final 6 races of the season after breaking his wrist in a motocross accident, which led to him finishing a dreadful 15th in the standings behind the 2 Suzukis of Kenny Roberts Jr. and John Hopkins. His future in the series was called into doubt, not helped with him being on the sidelines with an injury. And after it was announced that Pons would be pulling out of MotoGP with immediate effect after 2005 as a result of title sponsor Camel moving over to Yamaha, combined with the ban of tobacco sponsorship across most countries, it was also announced that Troy would be moving back to World Superbikes in 2006, reuniting with Ducati. After a frustrating time in MotoGP, Troy wanted to prove a point in 2006 and prove to everyone who had doubts about him that he still had what it took to be competitive. And my word, did he prove that. Throughout pre-season testing, Ducati looked to be very strong, with Bayliss topping 2 of the pre-season tests at Losail and Valencia. Then, going into the season, Bayliss showed that the pace of the Ducati during pre-season testing was not a fluke, as he went on to take the first pole of the season at Losail in Qatar. However, for both races, he was unable to convert the pole, with both James Toseland and fellow compatriot Troy Corser, who was the reigning champion going into the season, taking the wins instead respectively. However, Bayliss would grab second in both races to ensure he took the early lead in the standings. Then, at the following meeting, at Troy's home race at Phillip Island, Bayliss would once again grab pole. And although he would once again be unable to convert the pole in race 1, with Troy Corser winning instead, with Bayliss finishing down in 6th, Bayliss would bounce back in race 2 to take his first win back in WSBK and his first win since 2002. After a frustrating time in MotoGP, Bayliss returned to the top step of the podium, proving to everyone that he still had the speed to win. But little did we know at the time that this would end up being the start of an amazing run, as after winning his home race, Bayliss would go on a tear, as from Valencia to race 1 at Misano, he would win all of them, with the likes of James Toseland, Troy Corser and Noriyuki Haga not having an answer to his pace. Bayliss as a result had a very healthy lead in the championship, with it looking like no one was going to stop him. His streak of wins would come to an end in the second race at Misano, as a mistake whilst chasing down Toseland saw him finish down in 12th. He would lose more points at the following weekend at Brno, where he would retire from race 1 and finish down in 8th in race 2. However, at Brands Hatch, Troy would be back to his best, with him taking victory in race 1, followed by a second place finish in race 2, finishing behind Noriyuki Haga, which would turn out to be the Japanese rider's only win that season. A retirement in race 1 at Assen was made up for with victory in race 2, which meant as a result, Troy had a golden opportunity to wrap up the title at the following meeting at Eurospeedway in Germany. This, however, didn't happen, as thanks to a fall in race 1, Troy would finish down in 7th, which was then followed by a 3rd place finish in race 2. And with his nearest rival James Toseland winning race 2, it meant the championship continued on into Imola. In qualifying, Bayliss took his 5th pole of the season, ahead of Toseland in 2nd, Andrew Pitt in 3rd, and Troy Corser in 4th. Bayliss just needed to finish 6th, regardless of where Haga finished, and the championship would be his. At the start, Bayliss got off the line well and held on to the lead for the entirety of the first lap. However, on the following lap, he would be overtaken at Tosa by fellow compatriot Andrew Pitt, putting him into the clutches of Pitt's teammate Noriyuki Haga. A few laps later, an outgoing champion Troy Corser would make a mistake at the first Ravazza, putting him out of contention for the win. Then, a few laps later, Bayliss would get a scare, as coming out of the Senna S at Tamburello, Andrew Pitt would spin up the rear wheels, leaving Bayliss to take avoiding action to grab the lead, nearly allowing Noriyuki Haga and James Toseland to go by. Later on, Haga would drop back behind Toseland and Barros, with Bayliss in a comfortable position to take the title. A few laps later, and Toseland would grab the lead off Bayliss at turn 1, putting Bayliss under pressure from ex-Moto GP teammate Alex Barros. Barros would then get Bayliss later on at turn 1, but this was okay for Bayliss, because with Haga behind, he was in position to still win the title. Bayliss' chances were helped further as Barros would take the lead from Troy's other rival Toseland at Ravazza. Bayliss then cruised for the rest of the race, allowing the Yamahas of Pitt and Haga to get by. As Alex Barros crossed the line on the final lap to take victory, Troy Bayliss crossed the line in 5th to become the 2006 World Superbike champion. After a dominant season which saw his rivals struggle to find an answer, Troy Bayliss in his first season back in WSBK won the championship in convincing style and proved to everyone that he had not lost it after a difficult spell in Moto GP. Troy would win 2 more races to round off his amazing season, winning race 2 at Imola the day after he won the title, and then at the finale in Magny-Cours after an amazing fight for the win with James Toseland and Troy Corser. At the beginning of the video, I said that Troy Bayliss was the best rider of 2006 across all categories of motorcycle racing. Now you might be wondering why I believe this. Well, along with his dominant season in World Superbikes, there's one other race that makes me believe this, and it wasn't in World Superbikes. 3 weeks after the finale at Magny-Cours, Bayliss took part in the MotoGP finale at Valencia to replace the injured Sete Gibernau at Ducati as sort of a reward for winning the World Superbike title in convincing fashion. Despite having limited testing with the bike and also with the Bridgestone tyres, which was the tyre manufacturer Ducati were using in 2006, Troy, to the surprise of everyone, managed to qualify on the front row in 2nd place, beating his teammate Loris Capirossi by just under a tenth and missing out on pole by 2 tenths to Valentino Rossi, who was fighting for the title that weekend with the late Nicky Hayden. And in the race, Bayliss got the jump on the slow starting Rossi to take the lead, and despite immense pressure from Nicky Hayden up until Nicky was overtaken by Troy's teammate Capirossi, Troy would lead for the entirety of the race, not putting a foot wrong to take a shocking first and only MotoGP win. Despite having less mileage under his belt compared to everyone else on the grid, Troy had embarrassed everyone that weekend and proved to everyone why 2006 was his year. It's crazy to think that after having such a big chip on his shoulder after a frustrating time in MotoGP, that Bayliss would end up being the best rider in 2006. His incredible pace throughout that season, combined with his consistency, made him a well-deserved champion. And the fact that he was able to adapt to different machinery very quickly, similar to when he made his one-off appearance in the old 250cc class in 1997, just showed how incredible he was that year. Despite impressing everyone with his victory in Valencia, he would not return to MotoGP ever again, as he would continue to race in WSBK the following year. And despite taking 7 wins in 2007, he would end up losing the title to James Toseland, who would end up moving to MotoGP in 2008. I have made a video about Toseland's stint in MotoGP, which you can check out in the card on the top right. Troy would bounce back though in 2008 and would win his 3rd WSBK title, once again in dominant fashion, beating his fellow Troy by a massive 118 points. However, this would turn out to be Troy's last title in WSBK, as he would retire from motorcycle racing at the end of the season to keep in line with a promise he made that he would retire if he won his 3rd title. He would make a brief return in 2015 with Ducati, competing in the first 2 meetings of the season, replacing the injured Davide Guigliani. He would return to racing in 2018, making a return to the Australian Superbike Championship, where he finished 3rd in his first season back. However, in 2019, during the opening meeting of the season, Troy would have a practice crash, injuring his finger, putting him out of action, before deciding to retire again from racing. In 2021, he would suffer a serious cycling accident, which would lead to him breaking his neck, which thankfully he made a full recovery from. Nowadays, he is focused on his son Ollie's career, who is currently competing in the World Supersport Championship with Ducati, which is the category below the World Superbike Championship. 2006 will arguably be the year of Troy Bayliss, and even without that, Troy will undoubtedly go down as one of the greatest riders of all time. If you've never seen Troy race before, I highly recommend watching the 2006 MotoGP finale at Valencia, and you will see just how amazing he was at adapting to different machinery. Although, if you are a Valentino Rossi fan, like I am, it is a bit of a painful watch.